Please make sure that you have your vocabulary list out and your 3 articles so that you can find the same things in your articles I'm showing you in this article. First, we have the abstract. You can find that at the very beginning. It should be listed under or near the authors before the actual article begins, and it will summarize the key points of each of the sections that we're going to cover. First, we have the introduction, and there isn't always a title introduction here. They just start the article and don't list the word introduction, but it still is the introduction. One of the vocabulary words within the introduction that I want you to find is hypothesis. Hypothesis is the testable explanation that you're looking for. You find it by actually going to the very end. See, here we found the method section, which is the next section. You go just above it, and either in that paragraph or a little bit before it, but here we see we expected that greater diet-related support from spouses and more frequent shared meals with spouses would be linked with lower diabetes distress of both patients and spouses. And they have further hypotheses here as well. I'm not concerned whether or not you understand the hypothesis, but just try to identify where the hypothesis is. If you don't have a hypothesis here towards the end of this section, see if you can find something listing the aims of the article, or sometimes it may just have the research questions. We'll walk around next week to compare what you have and make sure you understand what you're seeing there. Into the method section, this is where it describes the procedures for the scientific investigations. This is how things happen, and it has many components to it, including participants. For example, this one says we have patient with type 2 diabetes. It's telling us who's participating. Also in the methods section, we will have the measures. This is what I'm having you look at, is trying to find measures from each of your articles. So you'll come here. Some of ours, as we noticed, can be labeled variables instead of measures, and that's what these are. These are the variables in the study. Now, we have variables that are not listed, like age, gender, years of education. They are still variables in the study. And then down here, what we often call the key variables, but just to know that they're variables, they're attributes. Do the participants have diabetes distress? And we have provision of diet-related support. These are some other variables. Now, in order to find your variable, the measure for your variable, for example, here we have diabetes distress. Let's look down for, here's another one, diet adherence. It says here it comes from the diet subscale of the summary of diabetes self-care activities, and here's the reference. We can go down to the bottom of the article and find that reference in the reference section. Copy it, paste it into Google Scholar, and here we see it's right at the top. We click on that, and it will take you to the article that will give you the information. Now back to our screen here. We'll go back. That was the methods section. Here we are back in the methods section. Here we go. That's where we just found some of these provisions. Diet adherence. Here we go again. Now coming down, next we have the results section, and it's going to summarize the collected data and the analysis that was performed. I'm not concerned with whether or not you understand any of these analyses at this point. We will review them later on, but to know that's what's in the results section. We also have tables in the results sections, and here you see the label variable. It's reviewing those same variables we saw in the methods section. Last, we have the discussion section. In the discussion section, I want you to find the limitation section. That's always at the end. maybe not the last, second to last, third to last, but it'll say things like our study is limited by, and I just want to see if you can find that paragraph within the discussion section. Again, we'll talk about it next week. Finally, we need to review what's cross-sectional and a longitudinal study. Those are the last vocabulary words. You find those by looking at multiple sources can help you. Often, it might be listed in the abstract. We'll look there first. When it says they investigated, and it doesn't say time 1 and time 2. So there's a good chance that it's cross-sectional. Cross-sectional means just once. Longitudinal means they did a time 1, time 2, maybe time 3, time 4, but it had multiple time points. Looking in the methods section, you can look as well for clues about whether or not they contacted them twice. You should have in the methods section a T1, T2, or time 1, time 2 to be able to find it. You'll also see hints in these charts of things listed at T1 and T2 time points. In the results, that's where you'll find some more of those charts. This one is a cross-sectional. See, all of these variables, there's no T1 or T2, so it's a good chance that it's cross-sectional. Again, the last place to find a clue, each section has a clue if you don't find it before then. Go back to that limitation section, and most times you'll be able to find a limitation, not always, but sometimes it will list as a limitation that there was cross-sectional. Here it has multiple paragraphs that talk about the limitations. One place you'll see that here is that it says one limitation is that we cannot determine the true causal nature of detected association between spouse involvement and diabetes distress. That causal nature is an indication that it's likely cross-sectional. Sometimes they even will use the phrase because of the cross-sectional nature of this study. So again, we're looking for time 1, time 2, baseline follow-up. That's an indication of longitudinal. I suspect that most of you will have cross-sectional studies, but please look to see if you can identify that.